Part 1. The Surgical Art of Awakening. Buddha's brilliance wasn't about having mystical moments, but in how he broke them down with a scientific lens. Unlike other spiritual guides who relied on metaphors and poetry, he approached consciousness like an expert, identifying its pieces and showing how they lead to both suffering and freedom. This detailed method makes Buddhist psychology super practical and something you can verify yourself. Every insight is something you can personally test. This whole framework is based on 4 observations that sound simple, but are deep enough to change how we connect with reality. These are known as the 4 Noble Truths. However, truth might be a misleading word in English. The original term translates better to noble realities or helpful insights. They're not beliefs you just accept, but truths you explore and experience directly. The first noble truth points out that life involves dukkha, typically translated to suffering, but it's really about all experiences that aren't fully satisfying. Buddha didn't figure this out through negativity, but through straightforwardly observing how consciousness works. He noticed that even joyful moments carry a sense of something missing, never quite reaching perfection. Take eating when you're hungry. The first few bites are satisfying, but as you keep eating, the pleasure dwindles until it feels routine, and too much becomes uncomfortable. This isn't about flaws in food or hunger, it's just the nature of all experiences. They rise, peak, and inevitably fade, leaving us looking for the next pleasure source. But Buddha's insight goes way beyond this surface pattern. He found 3 levels of dukkha running through all conscious experience. The first is dukkha, obvious suffering everyone knows well, physical pain, emotional distress, losing loved ones, or the frustration of unmet desires. This level is unmistakable and hits us directly. The second, viparinama dukkha, is much more subtle and thus trickier. It's about the suffering that comes from everything being temporary. Every moment of happiness is on a ticking clock towards its end, leading to a constant underlying anxiety in even the happiest times. Think falling in love is euphoric but often comes with worries. Will it last? Do they truly care? Am I worthy of this love? These fears stem not from anything being wrong, but from knowing deep down that everything is fleeting. The more precious it is, the more anxious we get about potentially losing it. The third level, sankhara dukkha, digs the deepest and reflects Buddha's unique psychological insight. This suffering arises from us being conscious beings always undergoing some change. Even when life seems perfect, there's a core restlessness in everyday consciousness. This isn't about neurosis or a mental issue, but about consciousness trying to hold onto patterns that keep changing. Imagine trying to create a stable self-identity on shifting sands. All thoughts vanish quickly, emotions shift, and body sensations constantly change. Beliefs, preferences, and memories all evolve or distort, and even our physical cells get replaced every few years. Yet something within us craves stability in this chaos, persistently searching for a permanent point in a sea of change. Constantly trying to make what's ever-changing stay still creates an underlying tension. The Buddha noticed that this third kind of suffering is so embedded in our day-to-day awareness that most folks don't even see it. It acts like some kind of background hum, adding a layer of unsatisfying incompleteness to everything we experience. That's why even with a nice life, good relationships and meaningful work, people often feel something's missing. It's why hitting long-held goals sometimes doesn't feel as rewarding as we imagine. It's why our minds constantly chase the next big thing, the next success, or the next fix to life's riddle. The Buddha dug deep into how these different kinds of suffering play off each other. He saw that our minds create complicated ways to dodge the obvious pains, but those tactics often make the subtle suffering worse. Chasing pleasure to escape pain makes us clingy, which only makes the pain of change hit harder. Trying to build a secure identity locks us into rigid thinking and behaving, which only adds the struggle of keeping something stable that's always shifting. He noticed that we tend to pin the blame for our pain on the outside world, leading to a never-ending shuffle of trying to rearrange external stuff without understanding what inside us drives dissatisfaction. People switch jobs, partners, places, or beliefs, thinking a new arrangement will bring lasting happiness. But really, the struggle comes from how we interact with experiences, not the experiences themselves. So these changes only soothe for a while until the same patterns pop back up. The First Noble Truth also shows the Buddha was taking a sharply different path from other spiritual and philosophical ideas of his era. Back then, most religions aimed at merging with cosmic forces, pleasing gods, or prepping the soul for a better next life. The Buddha zoomed in on figuring out the exact ways the mind conjures up its own suffering. His approach was more about healing than about mysticism, more about practicality than philosophy. He showed that suffering isn't a punishment for sin, not the result of some cosmic slip-up, and not mainly caused by outside factors. Suffering sprouts from specific mental processes we can watch, understand, and, in time, change. This insight pulls suffering out of the religious sphere and puts it within the realms of psychology and cognitive science. It implies that liberation isn't about changing the universe or appeasing invisible powers, but about skillfully managing one's own mind. The Buddha also understood that folks experience these three levels of suffering differently, depending on their psychological growth and life situations. Someone seriously sick or poor will worry most about the first glaring kind of suffering. For someone in a stable external situation but super sensitive, the second level might be more obvious, the subtle anxiety that comes with all fleeting joys. For someone who's developed psychologically, the third level, the persistent unease even in relative peace, might become noticeable. This awareness inspired the Buddha to create teachings that fit different levels of insight and temperament. The Buddhist path offers practical methods for tackling obvious suffering through ethical living and basic meditation. It gives more advanced practices for those ready to tackle the subtle pain that arises from clinging to life's ups and downs. And it offers the most refined practices for those ready to probe the deepest suffering rooted in the setup of ordinary consciousness. The First Noble Truth wraps up with possibly the most crucial realization. Acknowledging suffering isn't meant to make us despair or give up. The idea is to spark what the Buddha referred to as a deep spiritual drive, a kind of motivation that's strong enough to support the intense effort needed for a full psychological makeover. The moment you realize how much energy is drained trying to dodge the inevitable parts of life, you start searching for smarter ways to go about it. When you see how much suffering stems from trying to fight against reality's true nature, you genuinely want to figure out how to navigate life as it truly unfolds. Part 2. The Anatomy of Craving. The Second Noble Truth might just be Buddha's most advanced psychological insight, a revelation unmatched in Western psychology for over 2,000 years. After recognizing that suffering is a universal part of conscious experience, he dove into examining its roots. Instead of blaming external issues, he found an exact internal mechanism operating quietly under our everyday awareness. Known as tanha in its original language, commonly translated as craving, it describes a far more nuanced and all-encompassing process than the word usually implies. This craving isn't just about wanting things, it's that feeling of desperation that can taint any desire, suggesting your mental well-being hinges on getting, keeping, or avoiding certain experiences. Buddha pinpointed 3 kinds of craving that run in ordinary consciousness, each spawning its unique suffering and reinforcing one another in complex ways. Understanding these 3 types of craving offers a full map of how our minds trap us in misery. The first type, known as kama tanha, is the craving for sensual pleasure. This encompasses more than just sexual urges. It's the entire spectrum through which we seek satisfaction via the senses, anticipating a delicious meal when starved, desiring comfort when we're uneasy, yearning for stunning sights, sounds and textures. Such craving feels natural, even crucial for survival, making it incredibly dominant and rarely questioned at its core. Yet Buddha's analysis uncovered a striking truth about this craving. Its satisfaction is always fleeting, needing ever more to sustain the same pleasure level. This is no moral critique, but a reality check on how our minds operate when they lean on external things for happiness. The first bite of chocolate is divine. By the third, it's less thrilling, until continued eating turns automated or outright unpleasant. More vitally, sensual craving creates a deep dependence between our mental state and external situations. When specific experiences become essential for feeling whole, we get mentally exposed to their availability or lack thereof. This exposure shows up as anxiety when those cherished experiences aren't around, clinging while they are, and a restless search when they're missing. The mind mirrors a drug addict, always needing another pleasurable hit to stay balanced. The second type, bhavatanha, refers to craving for existence or becoming. It digs deeper than sensual craving, making it harder to spot. This craving is the relentless push to forge, sustain and grow a personal identity. It's the yearning to be significant, achieve big goals, leave an enduring legacy. But it also surfaces in subtler cravings. The need to win arguments, defend your take, keep a consistent self-view. This craving highlights consciousness's frantic bid to create permanence from what is inherently fleeting. Every thought vanishes in moments, yet the mind tirelessly attempts to sculpt a solid identity from these fleeting mental drops. Every part you play morphs with circumstances, but consciousness craves a fixed sense of self. Each triumph fades with time, yet the longing to become something more persists. Buddha noted that craving for existence fosters a unique mental suffering almost invisible to daily awareness. It shows up as ongoing dissatisfaction with now, because this instant never fully captures the identity craving dreams of solidifying. You're always on this journey of becoming, never really arriving at a fantasized state of complete selfhood. This creates a lingering feeling that real life waits ahead. The fulfillment will happen when you finally become who you're supposed to be. The third kind of vibhavatanha is the craving for non-existence or obliteration. It's sneaky and dangerous, often posing as wisdom or a spiritual epiphany. It shows up as the urge to escape life's hurdles by zoning out or avoiding them altogether. It's that hope for problems to just vanish, for tough emotions to stop surfacing, or for tricky situations to sort themselves out without lifting a finger. This craving can be pretty obvious in things like addiction, binge watching shows or burying yourself in work to dodge stuff. But it's also smart enough to trick even those who've been practicing self-awareness for ages. Picture a spiritual enthusiast who's more interested in rising above life's mess rather than tackling it deftly, or a meditator who uses mindfulness to sideline tough feelings instead of truly getting them. Even thinkers might hide in their thoughts to duck the chaos of real connections and duties. The Buddha figured out that these kinds of cravings share a fundamental pattern. They're all about the mind looking for comfort in something other than what's happening right now. Whether it's chasing thrills, trying to morph into something else, or eager to escape, the mind's forever hunting for what's only found in pure awareness. This game of tag with peace thrusts you into an ongoing state of restlessness, like you're never quite where you want to be. But the Buddha went further, exploring the nitty-gritty of craving's dynamics. He pinpointed a series of mental actions occurring countless times daily, usually slipping by unnoticed. This starts when a sense meets an object. Your eyes catch a colour, your ears pick up a sound, your mind stumbles on a thought. This sparks a feeling, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, automatically, no issues yet. The hitch is what follows. Craving takes the stage based on the feeling. A pleasant experience spurs a desire for more pleasure. A threat to the ego flares up a craving for existence. An unpleasant encounter stokes the urge to duck out. This whole string of reactions unwinds in a flash, rarely caught by conscious thought. After craving shows up, it triggers what the Buddha referred to as upadana, often translated as clinging. This is when craving morphs from a mere mental flicker into a hands-on effort to change what's happening. Clinging shows up as thoughts about the experience, ideas about its significance, strategies for getting more or ditching it, comparisons to past experiences, or forecasting future outcomes. The mind gets lost in these side thoughts and loses track of the real event that kicked things off. The Buddha identified 4 main forms of clinging that come from the 3 cravings. Clinging to sensual pleasure, which isn't just about desires but also includes the mind's quest for nice experiences. Clinging to opinions and beliefs, covering both deep philosophical ideas and everyday thoughts about how things should be. Sticking to rules and practices rigidly, from moral codes to spiritual routines. And clinging to selfhood ideas, all the ways we hold onto a personal identity. These types of clinging intertwine to drive what the Buddha called the wheel of becoming, a repeating cycle that locks consciousness in loops of yearning and unrest. Each act of clinging shapes karma, intentional acts shaping future experiences. These karmic seeds then colour how consciousness meets new experiences, nudging it towards certain cravings and clingings. This sets up a cycle where holding on to the past affects how we see things now, sparking new desires that lead to more attachment, impacting how we perceive the future, and it just keeps going. The Buddha's insights showed why trying to satisfy desires by getting what we want doesn't actually work. Our cravings aren't genuinely about what we're chasing. Instead, they're about trying to make ourselves feel secure and whole by controlling our experiences. But experience is ever-changing, making it impossible to control. Just like trying to hold water in your hands or catch a shadow. The more you pursue satisfaction, the more it slips away. What's even more challenging is that each time we crave, we strengthen the brain pathways and habits that lead to more craving. Giving in to sensual desires just makes us want them more. Struggling to keep or improve our self-image only ties us more to that image. Avoiding tough experiences just feeds our fear of them. Craving essentially feeds itself, growing stronger whether we fulfill it or not. That's why people can achieve their dreams and still feel unsatisfied deep down. The second noble truth turns the idea of taking responsibility for our experiences on its head. Most self-help and spiritual methods focus on changing our environment, dealing with past hurts, or finding better ways to cope. The Buddha's way zeroes in on the exact mechanics of how our minds create suffering moment by moment. This shifts our focus from just what's happening to how we're interacting with what's happening. It shows that real freedom isn't about having perfect experiences, but learning to engage with whatever's happening without needing it to be any different. In part 3 we talk about the promise of full freedom. The third noble truth makes a bold claim that in the history of human psychology, suffering, something that seems so inherent in our conscious lives, can actually come to a complete stop, not just for a moment, not half-heartedly, and not by perfecting our outer world, but by fundamentally changing how our minds work. This state of pure liberation is called nirvana, a term whose real meaning has been clouded by popular culture. Nirvana literally means extinguishing or snuffing out, like blowing out a candle flame. But it's not the consciousness itself that gets snuffed out. Rather, it's the compulsive thought processes that trap us in endless cycles of wanting and unhappiness. This doesn't mean losing consciousness. feeling emotionally numb, or withdrawing from the world. It's about a mindset free from the habits that cause suffering, one that is completely clear and responsive without desperately needing things to change. The Buddha's take on nirvana turns on its head almost everything we assume about what makes life worth living. Nirvana is described as the unconditioned, meaning it's not dependent on specific situations being just so. It's called the deathless, not because physical immortality is achieved, but because the constant struggle of becoming and unbecoming comes to an end. It's ultimate security, because the inner vulnerability that makes things feel threatening is no longer there. But the Buddha's insights go way beyond poetic phrases. They dig deep into the psychology of it all. He pinpointed what truly changes when our minds stop getting stuck in the cycles of craving and what stays the same. The senses, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, still function as usual. You still experience pleasant and unpleasant feelings from sensory contact. The body still has needs, you still have your likes and dislikes, decisions still need to be made. What changes is the compulsive reactions to these experiences. In a liberated state, you appreciate good moments without clinging. You acknowledge bad moments without fighting them, and you meet neutral moments with calm. Preferences are there, but they stay flexible, and don't turn into sources of mental suffering. You can want something without needing it to feel okay. You can dislike something without feeling the need to change it immediately. You're able to fully engage with whatever comes your way, all without banking your well-being on things being any different. The Buddha used powerful metaphors to explain this change, showing different sides of what liberation means. Nirvana is like a fire that's gone out, not from being snuffed out violently, but because it's burned up all the fuel. Suffering's fuel is craving, and when craving ends naturally through understanding and not suppression, the fire of suffering just goes out. There's no force or fight here. It's as gentle as watching a fever subside. Nirvana is also visualized as crossing to the other side of a wide river. The near shore is the usual consciousness, trapped in cycles of seeking and dissatisfaction. The far shore is consciousness freed from these cycles. The river symbolizes the spiritual path, the step-by-step journey that makes crossing possible. Once across, you don't need the boat anymore, but you don't forget how you got there. Liberation is part of and goes beyond the journey. Most significantly, nirvana is the stopping of constant becoming, ending the mind's compulsive need to build and hold on to the idea of a separate self. In our everyday mindset, we use a lot of mental energy trying to protect, enhance, and show off our ego. Our minds are always busy analysing who we are, comparing ourselves to others, figuring out how to maintain our identity, and thinking about how to get people to see us a certain way. But in a state of free consciousness, all this maintenance just stops. The energy that was once wrapped up in self-centered thoughts is now ready to directly experience reality as it truly is. The Buddha's teachings suggest that true freedom comes from understanding, not from achieving something. You don't get liberated by gaining something new, but by realizing something you thought was there never actually existed. The self we see as solid and important is actually just a construction, a process, not a thing, more a verb than a noun. Once this becomes clear, you don't need to destroy or ignore the self. It stops being a problem because you see it was a misunderstanding all along. The Buddha's view on self was a radical shift from most spiritual paths. Usually spiritual journeys focus on trying to merge or connect with a larger cosmic reality. But Buddhism uncovers that the self, needing to unite with something bigger, never existed separately. So there isn't anyone to free, because realizing liberation is seeing that the one who thought they needed liberating was a mistaken identity. This insight doesn't lead to feeling life is meaningless. Instead, it shows the compassion and wisdom that was always there but hidden behind the self-focused obsession. When the mind stops fixing on defending and boosting a separate identity, it's naturally tuned into the suffering and happiness of all beings. Ethics start to happen naturally, without effort. Wisdom seems inherent, not learned. Love turns into something boundless and not calculated. The Buddha also talked about whether liberation is lasting or temporary. He differentiated between different experiences of realization. Some fade and some last forever. Temporary liberation might happen during meditation or moments of deep realization, giving us a glimpse of what's possible. Complete liberation, however, involves a deep transformation of consciousness. Once it happens, it can't be undone. Not because a liberated person becomes perfect, but because they see through the core misunderstanding that causes suffering so thoroughly that they can't ever see it in the same way again. The enduring nature of complete liberation is likened to not being able to believe a rope is a snake once you've seen it's just a rope. You might still get startled if you see the rope in dim light, but you won't truly believe it's a snake. Similarly, a liberated consciousness might still have brief likes, emotional ups and downs, or physical discomfort, but these don't bring about the extra suffering that resistance and craving usually do. They're just seen as natural happenings that come and go, not as problems needing solutions. The Buddha also addressed what happens to motivation and how we engage with life when we no longer crave. Many folks assume life would get dull or empty without desire fueling it, but the Buddha paints a different picture. Without being tangled up in maintaining the self, we can engage creatively and spontaneously with whatever happens in life. Our actions come from wisdom and compassion, not from need or compulsion, making them more effective and gratifying. The third noble truth wraps up by recognizing that liberation isn't a reward for being good or a gift given by someone else. It's the natural result of understanding how suffering is born and working to remove its causes. This makes the path of Buddhism one based on experience, rather than on faith. You can check every step by experiencing it yourself. You can try out every insight by putting it into practice. You can look into every claim by closely watching your own mind. Freedom isn't something you're just wishing for down the line. It's something you can start to see and cultivate right now by understanding what's really going on in your consciousness at this moment. Part 5 dives into the illusion of personal identity. Buddhist psychology challenges us with an idea that's tough to wrap our heads around, that what we consider our identity is more of an ongoing process than a fixed thing, more like a verb than a noun. This idea, known as anicca, or not-self, is one of Buddha's groundbreaking contributions. It doesn't deny your existence. Instead, it suggests you're not quite what you think you are. Buddha's exploration into what makes up the self begins with a straightforward yet profound question. If a self exists, pin down where it is exactly. This isn't about philosophy, but rather an investigation anyone can undertake. When you search for this self that feels so crucial, what do you find? Is it resting in your body? Your body is always changing, swapping out nearly all its cells every 7 years, but you still feel like the same person. Is the self in your thoughts? Your thoughts are like a running stream. They pop up and fade away, shifting drastically based on what's happening around you, yet you hold on to some consistent sense of self. Could it be in your emotions or personality traits? Even these constantly change with your mood, health, and who you're around. You know you're not the same person when you're exhausted versus when you're fresh, or with family versus with strangers. You now, compared to you 10 years ago, have different likes, dislikes, and worries. Yet through all these shifts, something keeps making you feel consistently you. So what is it, and where is it hiding? Buddha discovered what we call the self is a dynamic interaction of 5 always changing parts, known as the 5 aggregates: form, sensation, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. Form includes your physical body and the material world. Sensation is the felt experience that pops up when consciousness links with sensory inputs. Perception is about recognizing and making sense of these sensory and mental insights. Mental formations cover thoughts, emotions, intentions, and psychological habits. And consciousness is the basic awareness making experience possible. These aggregates are in perpetual flux, arising, shifting, and fading based on conditions. Moment by moment, countless microprocesses happen as these come together with environmental shifts. The mind creates a continuous self from this constant change by weaving a story of permanence and stability, like a movie that tricks you into seeing a smooth action from a rapid series of still frames. The notion of a fixed self is more of an intricate mental construct than reality. Buddha's analysis reveals deeper mechanics behind this construction. He pinpointed a psychological process that keeps this self-illusion alive. Consciousness incessantly claiming each arising awareness as me or mine. When a thought pops up, it feels like my thought. An emotion becomes my emotion. A sensation is felt as happening to me. This constant labeling and claiming build the sense of being at the center of experience. Yet therein lies a contradiction. You cling to what's ever changing as if it's stable, own processes that are entirely impersonal, and treat conditioned phenomena as an unconditioned core. This creates a lingering insecurity as you attempt to craft a stable identity from fundamentally shifting elements. Imagine trying to build a sturdy house on shaky ground, or craft a lasting sculpture from running water. The more you attempt to nail down a sense of self, the shakier and more anxiety-inducing it becomes. The Buddha once shared a striking analogy to describe this predicament. Picture trying to hold water in your hands. The more you squeeze, the more it slips away. Similarly, the harder we try to pin down our identity, the more slippery and troublesome it becomes. This is why people may have everything they've ever wanted and still feel on shaky ground. It's not about what they have or don't have. It's about the whole effort to find certainty by tying it to ever-changing circumstances. Recognizing the concept of not-self isn't just some philosophical puzzle to figure out. While thinking about it can lay the groundwork, the real shift typically comes through deep meditation. This practice shines a light on how our personal identity is pieced together by letting us see it firsthand. As you grow more mindful, you start picking up on the near-constant habit of claiming your experiences as yours, crafting an identity from fleeting thoughts and emotions, and putting up walls to maintain this idea of a separate self. Finding this out can be pretty unsettling at first, as it challenges the most basic beliefs of how we usually view our consciousness. Without a solid self, who's having these experiences? Who's making choices or taking responsibility? Who's even on this spiritual journey? These questions push us to completely rethink what it means to be aware. Experience still happens, but not revolving around a separate self. Choices are still made, but they come from a mix of all conditions, not from a single decision maker. Responsibility still matters, but it's seen as something shared through the interconnected web of causes and effects, rather than tied to one single person. The Buddha addressed these worries by differentiating between the everyday truth and the ultimate truth. In everyday life, it's fine to use I and you, mine and yours, self and other. These terms help with communication, organizing society, and understanding moral responsibilities. But in the bigger picture, these labels don't point to solid, independent entities. They're like the imaginary lines of longitude and latitude on a map. They help us get around, but aren't real lines etched into the earth. Getting this distinction means you can keep up with daily life, while also being mindful of the deeper reality of interconnectedness and change. Grasping the notion of not-self brings about profound and freeing changes. Most of our mental stress comes from protecting and improving this separate self-image. Realizing selfhood as a construct not a fixed reality, frees up a ton of psychological energy for more creative and kind engagement with life. You can hold preferences without being chained to them, support views without needing others to validate them, and have experiences without being boxed in by them. The tendency to react defensively, which drives much of human conflict, begins to ease because there's less of a separate self to protect. This understanding of not self also reshapes your entire motivation for spiritual growth. Instead of aiming to better or go beyond yourself, you start seeing through the self that seemed to require enhancement or transcendence. It's less about reaching a future state of enlightenment. Rather, it's about realizing that the self striving for enlightenment is part of what needs to be understood. The practice becomes less about becoming someone better and more about recognizing there isn't really a someone to become in the first place. This shift makes the spiritual journey both more grounded and more profound. Moreover, as wisdom grows, compassion naturally follows. When you realize that the boundaries between yourself and others are just ideas we've created and not actual divides, looking after others comes as easily as looking after yourself. The pain others feel no longer seems like it's happening to a stranger. Instead, it happens within the same shared awareness that includes your own experiences. This new way of seeing things changes ethics from being a set of rules you have to follow into something natural that arises from understanding. Seeing beyond the idea of a separate self also changes how you see death and change. Without a solid, continuous self, there's nothing permanent that can be lost when someone dies. Death isn't the loss of a self, but rather a change in the configuration of the 5 aggregates, which continue in new forms driven by cause and effect. This doesn't mean individual survival after death, but it does show that the fear of shifting from being to non-being is based on a mistaken view. So death isn't the end of a self, but just the breaking apart of a temporary pattern in the ever-flowing processes of nature. Part 6. The ever-changing river. Everything in existence is constantly shifting, always appearing and disappearing in the blink of an eye, never staying the same. This idea of universal impermanence, known as Ana in the original language, is one of Buddha's core teachings about reality. Although it becomes obvious once it's pointed out, accepting this impermanence is tough for us. The mind's struggle to grasp constant change often leads to the suffering we experience in daily life. Buddha's exploration of impermanence started by observing his own experiences. Each breath has a start, middle, and end. Thoughts pop up, hang around for just a bit and vanish. Emotions begin, peak, and naturally fade away. Every physical feeling shows up, changes, and eventually goes away. Even deep-seated issues like depression or chronic anxiety consist of countless brief moments of appearing and vanishing if you look closely enough. This idea of things coming and going isn't just limited to obvious feelings and thoughts, it applies to everything around us. Your sense of self is always evolving as new experiences shape your identity and old memories adapt or fade. Relationships grow and change as people react to new situations and develop internally. What you believe and think shifts over time as new info challenges what you once thought you knew. Even your body is in a constant state of change, with cells dying and being regenerated, molecules forming and breaking down, and energy flowing in and out non-stop. Buddha didn't just stop at noting change over time, he went deeper, realizing that what seems like continuous existence is a series of countless brief moments of appearing and dissolving, happening incredibly fast. A seemingly solid table is actually teeming with billions of atoms, vibrating and swapping energy with their surroundings. What feels like a continuous stream of thoughts is millions of tiny moments of awareness popping up and fading away quickly. At its core, reality flickers like a strobe light, more movie-like than a still shot. This understanding of existence in tiny moments has huge implications for seeing how suffering arises and how it might be resolved. Much of our mental distress stems from trying to make permanent what is by nature impermanent. We want enjoyable moments to last forever, painful ones to end right now, and our sense of self to be constant. But the nature of existence makes these desires unattainable. Trying to hold back change is like trying to stop a river's flow or pause the setting sun. It's a futile effort that just builds tension and leads to frustration. Buddha pinpointed 3 ways that fighting impermanence causes suffering. The first is simple. Clinging to good times that are fading away brings the pain of loss. Falling in love comes with the worry about it ending. Success is haunted by the fear of upkeep. Achievements come with anxiety about slipping up in the future. Generally, this suffering is seen as due to circumstances, not impermanence. The second way is sneakier. Fighting the natural rise of unpleasant situations adds unnecessary layers of pain. Physical discomfort turns to deep distress when thoughts like, "This shouldn't happen," or "When will this end come?" Righteous emotions like sadness or fear become mental challenges when we resist them instead of letting them naturally ebb away. Resisting creates tension, which then leads to more resistance. What starts as a tiny passing cloud can easily transform into a full-blown storm. The trickiest part is that third way, where it sneaks in subtly and spreads quietly everywhere. It's that ever-present anxiety you feel just by being alive, knowing nothing really stays the same. Even when life's going great, there's this nagging insecurity, because deep down, you know, good times won't last forever. It's like constantly tiptoeing over a fragile thin ice, never quite able to unwind because change could crash in at any moment. This kind of suffering is so ingrained in our conscious minds that most folks see it as just the way life is, instead of realizing it's about fighting the inevitable change. The Buddha offered a perspective on handling impermanence that isn't about throwing in the towel or turning a blind eye. It's what you might dub radical acceptance. This means learning to shift your mind to align with life's natural ebb and flow rather than kicking against it. Radical acceptance isn't about becoming a doormat for destiny, but about growing wise enough to know the difference between when you can make a difference and when you just need to let things be. You can work hard to set up your life right, but you can't really steer the results because those depend on countless elements beyond your control. Getting the hang of accepting impermanence usually comes in stages. First, you might get it on an intellectual level that nothing stays static, but emotionally you're still catching up. You know good times will end, yet it still stings when they do. You get that rough patches will pass, but you still fight against them when they show up. This stage is crucial because it lays out the groundwork for digging deeper, but it doesn't yet bust those persistent habits of grasping and resistance. Then comes observing change directly through mindful awareness, noticing thoughts, feelings and sensations arise and fade away right before your eyes. This kind of first-hand observation slowly chips away at the illusion of experiences being stable, making it simpler to let go when change knocks. You start building what you might call change readiness, a nifty mental flexibility that helps you roll with new circumstances instead of getting stuck in how things once were. In the most profound understanding, you see that impermanence isn't a problem, but the core of life's fabric. Change turns into a doorway to freedom instead of a source of anxiety, since it shows that tough times don't last forever, and you don't have to cling desperately to the good ones. You start savouring the newness and creativity that constant change brings. Imagining a world without change would be dull, monotonic, and essentially devoid of life. The key elements that give life its vibrancy, like growth, learning, and personal evolution, all hinge on the fact that nothing lasts. This newfound relationship with impermanence has practical upsides right away. Decision-making becomes less stressful because you know no choice is set in stone, and you can correct mistakes as fresh info crops up. Your connections with people become less grabby because you see them as they are in the moment, Rather than trying to box them into roles or expectations, when planning for tomorrow you stay more adaptable, willing to tweak your goals as things shift. Even aging and the decline of your physical body become easier to accept, because they are recognized as natural parts of life's flow rather than personal slip-ups or cosmic slights. Plus, the Buddha taught that understanding impermanence can really help when grappling with heavy mental states like anger, fear, or sadness. Just remembering that these feelings won't hang around forever can ease their hold on you. Rather than getting entangled in the backstory of why you feel the way you do, or what you should do next, you can simply watch the emotions rise and fall and eventually just drift away. It's not about pushing your feelings aside or acting like they don't count. It's about seeing that they're temporary and letting them run their course. This understanding of change also switches up how you approach your spiritual journey. Instead of chasing a forever state of peace or enlightenment, you start to value the ever-changing nature of an awakened mind. Wisdom isn't about reaching a certain point, it's about adapting to whatever comes your way. Compassion isn't a set feeling, it's about continually responding to the suffering around you. Liberation isn't a final stop, it's an ongoing practice of letting go. This perspective makes your journey more humble and manageable, because it lifts the weight of chasing some perfect state. Grasping the idea of impermanence deeply also highlights how everything is connected. Nothing shifts on its own, it's all interlinked. When you change, your relationships change. When those change, the people around you change too. When they change, their relationships shift, creating a ripple effect that goes on and on. This awareness makes you more mindful about how your thoughts, words and deeds play into the ever-shifting web of life, making you feel more responsible without overwhelming you, as this responsibility is shared across the whole network of interconnectedness. Part 7. The web without a weaver. Nothing exists on its own. This idea is probably one of the deepest insights in Buddhist philosophy, challenging the basic beliefs ordinary people have about reality. Known as pratitya samutpada, or dependent origination, this concept shows that everything depends on certain conditions to exist, only comes about through relationships, and vanishes when those conditions change. Grasping this interconnectedness not only changes how you view the world, but also alters your understanding of yourself and your role in the vast network of life. The Buddha's exploration of interdependence started with a straightforward yet groundbreaking question. How do things come to be? Generally, people think that objects and experiences stand alone and then interact with other standalone objects and experiences. The Buddha observed the exact opposite. Things don't start off existing and then relate. They come into being because of their relationships. Nothing exists inherently or independently, because every existence relies on causes and conditions for its beginning, continuation, and end. Take something as basic as seeing a tree. This experience requires the tree itself, working eyes, enough light, a nervous system that processes what you see, past experiences that help you recognize the light and shadows as a tree, and countless other factors. If any of these conditions are missing, you won't have the experience of seeing a tree. The experience doesn't start independently and then meet these conditions. It happens because those conditions come together. Once the conditions shift or vanish, so will the experience. This rule applies to everything, even mental states, emotions, and the sense of who you are. Anger doesn't sit somewhere in your mind, waiting to be activated. It emerges when certain conditions align, a triggering situation, a narrative about it, physical tension, memories of similar events, and other psychological and environmental influences. Change any of these and the anger shifts or entirely fades away. Anger only exists due to these interdependent factors. The Buddha expressed this understanding as the principle of dependent origination, this arising that arises, this ceasing that ceases. This principle works at all levels, from obvious physical happening to subtle psychological events. Seeds begin to sprout when the right conditions converge: soil, water, temperature, and sunlight. Thoughts arise when consciousness meets objects via the senses, coupled with attention and memory. Suffering comes when craving meets impermanence, and the idea of a fixed self amidst changing circumstances. Liberation takes place when wisdom meets craving, amidst ongoing mindful reflection. The traditional teaching explains dependent origination with a 12-link chain illustrating how suffering continues through cycles of conditions. It starts with basic ignorance about reality's nature, especially ignorance regarding impermanence, suffering, and the illusion of self. This ignorance creates karmic formations, actions based on misunderstanding that shape future experiences. These formations influence consciousness, which affects name and form, influencing the 6 sense bases, leading to contact, generating feelings, sparking craving, leading to clinging, resulting in becoming, causing birth, and finally aging and death. Although this traditional approach can seem abstract, it describes mental processes happening countless times daily. Every moment of unconscious reaction strengthens mental patterns that affect your perception and reaction in future scenarios. Each act of craving builds stronger neural pathways for more craving. Every bit of resistance boosts the likelihood of resisting. Every time you identify with your thoughts and emotions, it makes such identification more automatic and convincing. Suffering keeps itself going through these cycles of learned reactions. But the same idea that explains ongoing suffering also shows us how to break and eventually stop it. When we swap ignorance for understanding, the whole cycle starts to change. By clearly seeing how our mental states form based on conditions, we can skillfully work with them instead of being controlled by them. Knowing how craving leads to attachment lets us interrupt the process before it overwhelms us. When we see how identifying with things causes pain, we can learn to approach experiences with less grip. Understanding interdependence reveals why personal liberation is tied to universal liberation. Since everything is connected, our well-being is linked to everyone else's. Our mental states impact those we meet. Their reactions affect their other connections, and these effects spread through the whole network of existence. In turn, other people's joys and pains influence us through the same interdependent lanes. This makes compassion not just a moral decision, but a recognition of reality. Grasping interdependence changes how we think about personal responsibility. We're neither fully in charge of everything that happens to us nor utterly powerless against outside forces. Our actions and mental states influence what we encounter, yet these conditions also affect how we can respond wisely. We're both creators and products of our situations, being both cause and result. This awareness fosters what could be called participatory responsibility, where you take accountability for your role while realizing it sits within larger uncontrollable patterns. The principle of interdependence also sheds light on how change happens in complex systems. Many assume change is linear, do something different, and the results are immediate. But the Buddha's teachings demonstrate that change unfolds through tiny interconnected shifts, often not instantly visible. Small steady adjustments in one area can eventually revamp the whole setup. Big changes that disregard interdependence often aren't sustainable, and realizing this can immediately enhance spiritual growth and personal development. Rather than brute forcing change through pure will, you set up conditions that naturally encourage the changes you seek. To build patience, work on your thoughts, feelings, tension, environment, and relationships all at once, rather than merely pushing away impatient reactions. To nurture compassion, explore what opens your heart versus what closes it, gradually tilting towards openness. Seeing interdependence also alters how we manage tough situations and tricky relationships. Instead of viewing problems as solid barriers needing brute force, see them as arrangements of conditions that can be shifted through smart interaction. A difficult relationship is a dynamic process with all involved bringing their conditioning, responding to one another, all capable of altering the overall pattern with their choices. This viewpoint unlocks creative options unseen when thinking of independent entities battling for control. When grasping interdependence deeply, the arbitrary nature of categories and boundaries we typically think solid becomes evident. The lines separating self and other, inside and outside, success and failure, good and bad, reveal themselves as handy tools, not absolute truths. It doesn't negate these distinctions, but allows us to handle them with more ease and skill. You can navigate typical categories successfully, keeping in mind their creations and not just discoveries. The Buddha often used various metaphors to explain interdependence, each one revealing a unique part of this essential idea. Imagine reality like an enormous web of jewels, where each jewel mirrors all the others, so altering one jewel affects the whole web. Think of existence as a tree. Its roots, trunk, branches and leaves all rely on each other for the tree to thrive. Picture consciousness as limitless space that lets everything happen within it, while still being touched by all that appears. These metaphors aim to shift the way we see things, beyond the usual subject-object split we're used to, and highlight the seamless unity behind the seeming divisions. Part 8. The legacy of our actions. Every choice we make has a domino effect that influences how things unfold in the future. This concept, known as karma in Sanskrit, is one of the Buddha's clearest pieces of wisdom and a vital lesson in living wisely. However, the Buddha's idea of karma isn't about cosmic fairness or mystical systems of reward and punishment. Instead, it's a smart take on how our own consciousness is molded by the decisions we make, setting up the situations we'll face down the line. The term karma literally translates to action, but the Buddha zoomed in on intentional actions, choices made consciously rather than automatic or gut reactions. Every mindful thought, every intentionally spoken word, and every action we choose has a ripple effect, influencing how we'll experience things later. These actions are like seeds in the garden of our consciousness, lying in wait until the conditions are right for them to come to life again. Grasping this concept gives us a clear way to take control of our own spiritual growth and mental health. The Buddha identified 3 kinds of karma based on how intentional actions are expressed. Mental karma covers all our aware thoughts, intentions and attitudes, especially those we deliberately cultivate or reinforce. Verbal karma isn't just about what we say, but all forms of communication, like writing, body language, and even the quality of our silence in different situations. Physical karma involves actions carried out with awareness, whether it's helping or harming someone, adjusting our posture or the care we take in handling things. But the Buddha's teachings dig deeper than just listing types of actions. He noted that an action's effect isn't determined by its form, but by the thoughts behind it. The same behavior can lead to vastly different outcomes based on whether it's driven by greed, anger and delusion, or by generosity, kindness and wisdom. For instance, donating to charity cultivates positive karma if it's out of true compassion, but might reap negative karma if it's done for praise or tax perks. Telling the truth can be beneficial when it's to help someone understand clearly, but can be harmful if it's meant to hurt with harsh truths. This focus on motives shows that karma is more about guiding consciousness than seeking rewards or avoiding punishment. Each conscious act reinforces the mindset that fueled it, making similar feelings and actions more likely to occur. Acts of kindness build up your capacity for more kindness. Moments of mindfulness make it easier to stay mindful. Choices of wisdom grow more wisdom within you. Conversely, selfish acts strengthen self-interest. Choices made from anger lead to more anger. Confused actions breed more confusion. Karma is really all about consciousness training itself through the choices it makes. The Buddha also noted that results from karma can manifest at various times based on certain factors, such as how strong the intention was, the nature of the action, and the setting where it occurred. Some karma acts quickly, producing outcomes within the same lifetime or even the same day, like harsh words causing instant tension, kind deeds bringing immediate joy, or lies leading to anxiety over being found out. Other karma may take longer to manifest, sometimes even not ripening until future lifetimes, lying dormant until the right moment to come to fruition. The teaching of karma goes beyond individual actions, highlighting the collective impact of repeated patterns over time. The Buddha noted that our consciousness tends to lean towards certain ways, based on the mental states and behaviors we reinforce repeatedly. If someone tends to react to challenges with fear consistently, they'll find themselves becoming more fearful over time. On the other hand, if someone faces difficulties with bravery, their confidence and resilience grow. These psychological habits don't just affect a person's day-to-day experiences, but also shape the types of situations and relationships they attract. Because in the world of consciousness, similar energies draw towards one another. This insight into habitual karma offers a clear path for transforming oneself psychologically. Instead of relying solely on willpower to change deep-seated patterns, you can actively work to cultivate the opposite traits through deliberate and repeated practice. Want to be more patient? Practice showing patience in smaller situations until it feels natural in bigger ones. Wishing for more compassion? Focus on nurturing compassionate thoughts and actions until being compassionate becomes your go-to reaction to others' suffering. This method goes with the flow of mental growth rather than swimming against it. The Buddha's teachings on karma also highlight that not every experience comes from past karma. He pointed out different kinds of suffering born from various sources: suffering from current choices, natural physical occurrences, unavoidable external circumstances, and the inherent conditions of living a physical existence. This awareness prevents people from misusing the concept of karma to unfairly blame individuals for their situations, or use it as an excuse to justify social inequities as spiritually justified. Karma does explain some experiences, but doesn't account for everything that happens in life. The link between karma and rebirth is among the most intricate parts of Buddhist psychology. The Buddha explained that consciousness persists beyond physical death, carrying the karmic build-up from a lifetime of choices and actions, affecting future rebirths and the life conditions that follow. However, this idea should be seen alongside his broader teachings on personal identity. It's not an unchanging soul that moves on, but a flow of conditioned consciousness shaped by past intentions and habits. Like one candle lighting another, rather than moving a person from one house to another. Even if one doesn't accept the notion of literal rebirth, the psychological truths underpinning karma can be directly understood by observing oneself. Every conscious decision shapes future thoughts and actions. Each intentional move influences future possibilities. Every moment spent training the mind impacts how it will face future situations. These processes are at play throughout every life, regardless of what might occur post-death. Grasping these concepts provides practical guidance for spiritual growth, independent of metaphysical beliefs. The Buddha also offered techniques for cleansing negative karma while boosting the positive kind. Through confession and sincere regret, we can minimize the damage of harmful actions by recognizing their negative impacts and promising to make better choices moving forward. Actions rooted in generosity, kindness, and service can counteract selfish patterns from past behaviors. Mindfulness and meditation can interrupt knee-jerk reactions before they lead to new negative karma. Most significantly, gaining insight into the nature of reality can revamp the entire karmic process by uncovering the constructed nature of the self that appears to be gathering karma. The ultimate aim of understanding karma isn't to become a master at controlling outcomes, but to cultivate a wisdom that rises above the cycle of cause and effect. When consciousness sees through its fabricated persona and realizes the interconnectedness of everything, the urge to create karma naturally lessens. Actions will still happen, but they'll stem from wisdom and compassion rather than a frantic need to build and keep a separate self. This is what you might call transcendent karma. It's about taking actions that help free everyone without clinging to the idea of an individual doer. When it comes to karma, the lesson wraps up with the understanding that each moment gives us a new chance to shape our awareness through the choices we make consciously. No matter what patterns we've built up in the past, every moment of being mindful opens up the chance to make decisions that lead to more freedom, wisdom, and compassion. That's why the present moment is super important for spiritual growth. It's the only time we can actually create karma. The past has already happened and can't be altered. The future hinges on what we decide right now, but the present is buzzing with the potential to change through conscious intentions and wise actions. Part 9. Understanding awareness itself. Consciousness is super intimate to our existence, yet it's wrapped in mystery. Every single experience you've ever had happened within consciousness. Every thought originated in awareness. Every feeling, sense, and sight showed up in the space of conscious knowing. But when you try to focus on consciousness itself, it slips away like quicksilver, resistant to ordinary logical thinking. The Buddha's deep dive into the mind's nature is perhaps his most nuanced and profound gift to human understanding, showing us that consciousness is both the root of all suffering and the way to ultimate freedom. The Buddha starts by clearly separating consciousness from its contents. Normally, our awareness is so tangled in what it knows that it never looks at the knowing aspect itself. You're aware of your thoughts, but hardly notice the awareness where thoughts come up. You feel emotions, but rarely pay attention to the act of feeling. You see and hear things, but seldom watch the process of perceiving. This constant outward focus tricks us into believing that consciousness is created by its contents, instead of seeing that these contents appear within consciousness. The Buddha pointed out 6 kinds of consciousness based on our senses: sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, and mind. Each arises when its related sense organ encounters something suitable, along with the presence of attention. Eye consciousness kicks in when your eyes see colour and shape while you're paying attention. Ear consciousness happens when you hear sounds, while your awareness is active, and so on. Mind consciousness arises when you mentally engage with thoughts, memories, emotions, and other mental activities while focusing inward. But the Buddha's dive into consciousness digs even deeper than just charting different sensory awareness types. He found that consciousness has no inherent traits, except for the sheer ability to know or be aware. Unlike its constantly shifting contents that have fixed qualities, consciousness itself is like clear space, allowing everything to show up without being altered. A mirror reflects anything, but the reflection doesn't alter the mirror's capacity. In the same way, consciousness can be aware of anything, but its quality of awareness stays unaffected by what it's aware of. This understanding highlights why getting tangled up with mental and emotional content causes suffering. When consciousness starts identifying with its contents, it gets caught up in the changes, conflicts, and limits of these contents. If you think your thoughts define you, disturbing thoughts can make you suffer because they feel like they threaten your identity. If you think you are your emotions, you get stuck in their highs and lows, since your happiness seems to depend on having the right emotions. If you define yourself by your roles and accomplishments, any threats to these outer identities feel like a threat to your very being. The Buddha's findings showed that this identification isn't necessary and comes from misunderstanding. Consciousness doesn't need to latch onto anything to stay its natural aware presence. Thoughts can come and go without affecting consciousness. Emotions can flow through without shaking its core stability. sensations can appear and vanish without changing the ability to experience them. Realizing that consciousness is naturally free from its contents is incredibly liberating. Learning to view consciousness usually starts by noticing the contents of awareness without getting tangled up in them. This means developing what can be called metacognition, the skill of being aware of awareness itself. Instead of just getting caught up in our thoughts, you learn to become aware that you're thinking, and rather than just feeling emotions without question, you start to notice them as they play out in your mind. This shift from being absorbed in our experiences to simply observing them brings a great deal of psychological freedom. It allows you to see that you're not just whatever is happening in your mind at any given moment. As you get better at this kind of thinking, you might stumble upon what's called witness consciousness, a state where you're fully present and noting all mental activity without getting swept away by it. This witness isn't just another thought or mental state. It's more like your consciousness recognizing what's going on inside it. From this vantage point, even your most intense emotions or compelling thoughts are just fleeting moments in the bigger picture of awareness, rather than threats to your true self. Finding this space can be incredibly relieving, as it shows you there's a part of you that's always at peace and untouchable. However, the Buddha's teachings go even further than recognizing this witness consciousness. He questions if there's actually a separate me that's experiencing everything. When you look really closely, what do you find? Is there a concrete you that owns consciousness, or is it just consciousness creating the illusion of a someone being aware? This probing often uncovers that what seems like the experiencer is just another mental event in your awareness, no more substantial or lasting than any other thought or feeling. Understanding this leads to what some call non-dual awareness, the insight that consciousness and its contents aren't really separate. It's like how water's wetness or fire's heat are simply properties of something whole. There's no consciousness without something to be conscious of, and no experience without the consciousness it occurs within. This way of seeing things dissolves the usual split between subject and object, showing everything as a unified reality, rather than split into parts interacting with each other. Buddha also explored different states of consciousness that become accessible through ongoing meditation. He detailed a series of increasingly refined states called jhana, each characterized by deeper levels of focus, calmness, and mental cohesion. In these states, normal thought patterns fade away, letting you tap into subtle layers of consciousness usually hidden by the constant noise of thoughts and emotions. These focus states not only provide a temporary break from mental distress, but also offer a clear vantage point for exploring what awareness truly is. The deepest meditative states may even reach what Buddha referred to as the cessation of perception and feeling, where all conscious activity temporarily halts. Practitioners in this state often report that while consciousness seems to have stopped, awareness persists on a level too subtle for words. This experience points to the idea that consciousness isn't generated by mental activity, but is the backdrop against which all mental activity arises and subsides. Buddha's teachings on consciousness also consider the link between personal awareness and universal consciousness, while recognizing that each of us has a unique stream of consciousness shaped by our experiences and karmic influences. He also hinted that at the core, all consciousness shares a common essence. Just like individual waves in an ocean, our minds can be seen as expressions of a universal awareness. This perspective sets the groundwork for true compassion, as it acknowledges that others' suffering occurs in the same vast field of consciousness that includes our own experiences. Understanding consciousness this way has immediate and significant practical effects. Once you realize you're not the same as your thoughts and feelings, dealing with psychological issues becomes much easier because they no longer mess with your core self. Finding the natural calm and steadiness of your own consciousness means that outside events can't shake your deep sense of peace, and when you catch a glimpse of the oneness of awareness, the imaginary line between you and the world starts to fade away, showing the closeness and connection that have always been there. The Buddha's exploration of consciousness leads to the understanding that complete freedom doesn't come from rising above consciousness or tweaking it, but from seeing its real nature. Consciousness is already liberated, already serene, already complete. The illusion of being stuck or suffering stems from mistakenly identifying with the temporary stuff in consciousness, rather than seeing it as the constant space where all change happens. True freedom isn't something new to reach. It's realizing that you were never truly tied down in the first place. Part 10. Exploring inner worlds, the essence of meditation. When it comes to Buddhism, meditation isn't just about kicking back and relaxing, even though it can be incredibly calming. It's not about running away from reality, though it does offer a safe space from mental turmoil. It's also not self-hypnosis or positive thinking, despite its ability to alter how you deal with tough thoughts and feelings. Buddhist meditation is all about systematically cultivating awareness. It's a clear-cut approach to understanding consciousness and reality by observing them directly, rather than just philosophizing. This might just be the most advanced method mankind has ever come up with to study the mind. Everything Buddha taught can actually be proven through ongoing meditation, turning it into a real discovery rather than just a belief. All Buddhist meditation techniques hinge on what's called sati, which usually translates to mindfulness, but it's way more complex than that word implies. Sati involves being fully conscious of the present, seeing things as they really are without any distortion, staying focused without getting lost in mental chatter, and wisely distinguishing between beneficial and harmful mental states. These mental skills work together to form a steady base for exploring reality as it is, without the usual assumptions and knee-jerk reactions. The Buddha laid out 4 foundations of mindfulness that serve as a thorough guide for honing focus and gaining insight. These cover all parts of human experience, ensuring no part of existence is left in the dark. Mindfulness of the body includes things like being aware of your breath, posture, movements, and physical sensations. It keeps you anchored in the present physical reality, helping you escape the never-ending spiral of mental chatter. This practice grounds you in your body instead of living in thoughts and concepts. Mindfulness of breathing, in particular, is crucial since it's the backbone of most Buddhist meditation practices. The breath is an ideal focus point because it's always there, rhythmic, connected to both body and mind, and neutral enough to not stir up strong emotions. But mindfulness of breathing is more than just counting your breaths or using it to relax. It involves being acutely aware of each breath, noticing the nuances of inhaling and exhaling, the natural pauses, and how breathing shifts in response to mental states. You even start noticing the rise and fall of each breath as its own moment of awareness. As you get deeper into it, you realize that breathing, which seems simple at first, is actually packed with fine details. Each breath varies in texture, temperature, rhythm, and depth, all of which fluctuate based on physical and mental states. Even the space between breaths isn't just empty, it's vibrant with awareness. You begin to see how breathing and thinking are linked, as mental activity impacts breathing patterns and vice versa. This revelation, finding profound intricacies in the seemingly simple act of breathing, trains you to see deep meaning in everyday things. Mindfulness of feelings is the second foundation, and it's about tuning into the basic feeling tone that comes with every conscious moment. Before you even identify what you're experiencing or start weaving stories about it, there's a brief moment where you feel either good, bad, or neutral. This initial feeling tone pops up on its own and isn't problematic at first, but it quickly sets off automatic reactions of craving and aversion, leading to mental suffering. By learning to catch the feeling tone early, before those reactions kick in, you gain a crucial tool for stopping the cycle of craving that Buddhism says is the root of all suffering. Keeping track of the feeling tone takes some serious precision and patience, because these feelings are often fleeting and can be subtle. A pleasant feeling tone can disappear in seconds as it gets replaced by the urge to hold on to it, followed by worries about it slipping away. An unpleasant tone quickly gets buried under our resistance and the narratives we create about how this shouldn't be happening. Neutral ones, they usually fly right under the radar because the mind's busy seeking something more exciting. Getting the hang of spotting these feeling tones before they kick off a reaction is like catching the flash before it lights a fire. Mindfulness of mind is what comes next. Here the focus is on stepping back from what's filling our consciousness to watch how the whole process unfolds. Instead of getting wrapped up in specific thoughts or emotions, you start recognizing various mental states as they come and go. It's about noticing anger without getting angry, spotting fear without feeling scared, and witnessing desire without letting it drive you. Psychologists call this cognitive diffusion, being able to watch mental happenings without them taking over. This part of mindfulness practice shows that most psychological pain doesn't stem from the tough thoughts and emotions, but from mistaking them for who we are. Observing anxiety as just a temporary guest in your awareness changes the game. It's still uncomfortable, sure, but it no longer shakes up your core sense of self. Watching angry thoughts come and go like passing clouds diminishes their grip because you're no longer tied to them. This transformation from identifying with thoughts and emotions to simply observing them is one of meditation's most powerful insights. Moving on to mindfulness of phenomena, the fourth foundation is about watching how everything in life pops up and fades away according to natural rules, not personal whims. This involves digging into the three universal truths the Buddha talked about: impermanence, suffering, and the lack of a permanent self. With continued observation, these truths start to reveal themselves in real time rather than just as concepts. You see thoughts emerge from nowhere and then disappear. Emotions surface and vanish, and sensations constantly shift without anyone forcing these changes. Realizing this breaks down the illusion of control over experiences, or that they should fit your desires. It's not a downer, but incredibly freeing, since you realize you never needed to exert control in the first place. You can just go with the flow instead of wearing yourself out, trying to mold experiences to your liking. It's not about giving up, but about smartly aligning with reality's true nature. The Buddha also taught specific meditations to boost concentration, a skill that lets you focus your attention on one thing for a long time without getting sidetracked or zoning out. While mindfulness is about being open to whatever's happening, concentration zeroes in on deep focus, which gradually harmonizes the mind and unveils deeper layers of consciousness. The Buddha described 8 stages of this concentrative absorption, called jhanas, each with distinct qualities of joy, calm, and mental unity. These states offer temporary breather from psychological stress and provide a stable footing for diving into deeper insights about reality. The first jhana kicks in when your mind becomes so focused on its meditation object that usual mental chatter hushes, making room for sustained attention sprinkled with joy and physical pleasure. This blissful state shows that happiness doesn't need outside triggers. It can be developed by training the mind. When you hit the second jhana, even the effort to keep concentrated fades, leaving behind pure joy and peace. The third and fourth jhana take you to more refined states of calm, where even joy is seen as a mental action that eventually isn't necessary. Beyond these, Buddha talked about deeper states called the formless absorptions, where focus moves away from physical sensations to higher awareness. In the infinite space absorption, you realize awareness is limitless. The infinite consciousness absorption lets you see this limitless awareness is alive and knowing. In the nothingness absorption, you find that traditional consciousness isn't the deepest level of awareness. The absorption in neither perception nor non-perception hits such a subtle awareness it's beyond ordinary words. Although these focused states are deeply peaceful and insightful, Buddha stressed they're just tools to gain the wisdom necessary for full freedom. Sometimes people get so drawn to these states they think they're enlightenment, but Buddha pointed out they're simply conditioned experiences that come and go. True freedom means understanding all conditioned states, even the most refined meditation states, without clinging to any specific level of consciousness. The jhanas strongly support insight practices, yet insight must be built by carefully looking into how everything arises and fades based on natural laws. Buddha also introduced walking meditation to go with sitting practice, showing that consciousness needs to be trained both in stillness and in motion. During walking meditation, you apply mindful attention to walking as you would to breathing in sitting practice. You notice the lifting, moving, and placing of each foot, how your weight shifts, muscle movements, and how you stay balanced while moving. This practice helps weave meditative mindfulness into daily routines, challenging the idea that mindfulness only happens in formal meditation. Merging meditation with everyday life is crucial in Buddhist practice. The insights and abilities developed in formal meditation need to gradually expand to all life activities for lasting changes in consciousness, rather than just quick relief from usual mental habits. This merger involves bringing meditative attention to daily tasks like eating, cleaning, walking, and even talking and listening. Gradually, the line between meditation and daily life fades as awareness becomes constant, instead of being switched on and off at set times. Buddha wrapped up his meditation teachings by noting there is, ultimately, no meditator, no meditation method, and no goal to chase through meditation. These are just names that help start the journey but must be surpassed as practice grows. What stays is simple awareness of itself, consciousness directly knowing its own nature without needing concepts or techniques. This is the true outcome of meditation practice, not reaching a special state but realizing what was always there under mental constructs. Part 11. The Heart of Awakening. Buddhist ethics don't stem from religious rules or societal norms. They arise from truly understanding reality's nature and what different actions lead to. When you get how everything's connected, harming others is like harming yourself. When you see your ego's illusion in self-serving actions, the urge for such behavior fades away. When you realize how much suffering comes from greed, hatred and delusion, practicing generosity, love and wisdom isn't about following rules but about being sane. Buddhist ethics are grounded in what Buddha referred to as the 3 roots of wholesome action: non-greed, non-hatred and non-delusion. They're more than just missing bad qualities, they're positive states of mind with their own perks. Non-greed shows up as sharing, being content and treasuring what you have instead of always wanting more. Non-hatred shows as kindness, patience and dealing with tough times wisely instead of reacting in anger. Non-delusion means seeing things clearly, understanding them, and not letting fear or wishful thinking cloud your perception. The practice of generosity, known as dana in Sanskrit, is crucial in Buddhist teaching because it directly opposes the grasping mindset that leads to suffering. Being generous isn't just about giving stuff away, but shifting from a mindset of scarcity to abundance. It means recognizing that clinging to things, experiences and ideas causes stress, but letting go can lead to more joy and freedom. True generosity means giving without expecting anything back, not keeping tabs or using giving as a way to control or gain approval from others. Buddha talked about levels of generosity linked to how spiritually developed someone is. A beginner might give material things while still feeling attached, hoping for praise or feeling proud of the act itself. Intermediate givers are more open but still see themselves as do-gooders. Advanced generosity goes beyond seeing self, gift and receiver as separate, realizing these ideas often block the free flow of care and support. Another key part of Buddhist ethics is loving kindness, or metta. It's not about forcing emotions or being superficially friendly, but rather a mental training that tears down emotional walls between people. You typically start by fostering genuine goodwill toward yourself, since it's tough to care for others if you're constantly battling your own mind and feelings. This self-kindness is smart self-care that provides the stability needed to look after others effectively. Once you're good with yourself, you expand kindness to loved ones, then neutral folks, then difficult ones, and ultimately to all beings everywhere. This growth challenges the usual mental divisions of us versus them, friend or foe, worthy or not. The practice uncovers how these divides are arbitrary, limiting connection and joy while fueling stress and clashes. As your heart opens to more beings, the fake walls of loneliness and isolation break down. Buddha also offered strategies for dealing with anger and resentment, knowing these feelings are tricky when trying to nurture loving kindness. The traditional method doesn't involve bottling up anger or letting it run wild, but understanding it deeply to transform its core energy. Anger tends to bubble up when something you deeply care about feels threatened or violated, revealing a lot about your values and what worries you. To handle anger well, you need to pull out this useful info while letting go of the harmful emotional charge that can hurt both you and others. A great way to tackle anger is by digging into the stories that fuel it. Anger doesn't just pop up because of situations, but from how you interpret them, especially if you think someone is out to harm you or messing with your vision of how things should be. When you take a closer look at these stories, you might find they're built on assumptions about people's intentions that might not be true. Most folks are just doing their best with what they know and their current situation, even if their actions create issues for you. This doesn't mean excusing bad behavior, but it helps you avoid extra suffering from taking things too personally. Having compassion, known as karuna, goes beyond loving kindness by responding skillfully to any suffering you find. While loving kindness wishes for everyone to be happy, compassion hopes everyone can be free from suffering and works towards that freedom. Real compassion takes a lot of strength and wisdom, because you're willing to face suffering without getting overwhelmed, and instead responding with clarity, not with knee-jerk emotions. Sometimes compassion might seem harsh from afar, like when you say no to requests that would fuel bad habits, or refuse to reinforce comforting yet harmful collective beliefs. The Buddha made a distinction that could be seen as emotional compassion versus wisdom compassion. Emotional compassion feels others' pain and wants it gone right away, which can lead to burnout and actions that ultimately increase suffering. Wisdom compassion, however, digs into the root causes of suffering, addressing them instead of just covering symptoms. This might involve allowing people to face the consequences of their actions or offering guidance and support to help them grow, rather than just providing comfort. Wisdom compassion thrives because it doesn't revolve around solving everyone else's problems, but focuses on creating conditions where people can build their wisdom and strength. Practicing mudita, or sympathetic joy, is one of the toughest parts of Buddhist ethics for most folks. Mudita is all about genuinely celebrating other people's happiness and success, even when it seems to chip away at your own opportunities or shine a light on your own shortcomings. This practice battles against the urge to constantly compare yourself to others, a mindset that breeds envy, jealousy, and competition. Being truly happy for others' successes, no matter your situation, marks a big shift from feeling like there's not enough to go around to believing in abundance. Cultivating mudita helps you realize how much mental energy gets wasted on comparing yourself to others and feeling either superior or inferior because of it. When you can celebrate others' wins without feeling smaller, and appreciate their good qualities without feeling lesser, you find a lot more mental space to focus on your growth and contributions. This isn't about ignoring your own needs and goals, but chasing them from a place of inner abundance, rather than cutthroat competition. Mudita changes relationships from being a win-lose situation, where one's victory means another's loss, to shared celebrations of the potential for happiness and fulfillment in everyone. Equanimity, known as upekkha, is the pinnacle of ethical growth and underpins all other positive traits. It's not about being indifferent or detached, but having a balanced awareness that stays clear and responsive, no matter what's happening around you. It's all about knowing the difference between what's within your control and what you just have to accept. Having the strength to stay calm when everything's going crazy, and being flexible enough to navigate ever-changing situations is key. Equanimity lets you care deeply for the well-being of all creatures while keeping in mind the big picture and understanding your limited role in it. The Buddha also shared practical advice on ethical living that nurtures these qualities. The 5 precepts set a basic path for avoiding actions that bring suffering to yourself and others. Don't kill, steal, engage in sexual misconduct, lie, or use substances that mess with clear thinking. But these precepts aren't just random rules. They're grounded in recognizing how our actions impact our minds and how we relate to others. When you follow them wisely, rather than strictly, they help create peace, trust, and clarity in both personal and social settings. The rule against killing goes beyond obvious violence to all forms of causing unnecessary harm to living things. This means being aware of how your lifestyle affects other beings, how your words might hurt others, and how your thoughts might feed a culture of hostility. Positively, this precept means actively respecting and nurturing life in all its diversity, finding ways to support life rather than just avoiding harm. It might look like choosing eco-friendly products, speaking kindly, and fostering attitudes that promote life. Buddhist ethics emphasize that true morality is intertwined with wisdom and mental clarity. If your ethical behavior is solely based on willpower, it can become inflexible and harsh, falling apart under pressure. When ethics come from understanding how everything is connected and the impact of our actions, they naturally flow from wisdom instead of feeling like a restriction. This deeper motivation turns ethical living from a chore into a source of joy that enriches your true self. Part 12. The Blossoming of Understanding. Buddha knew that people need different ways to awaken, depending on their personalities, life situations, and mental growth. This understanding gave rise to various Buddhist schools and traditions. Each one highlights specific parts of the complete teaching, while sticking to the core ideas about suffering, its roots, and how to achieve freedom. Instead of being seen as contradictions or distortions of the original message, these different paths showcase the depth and flexibility of Buddha's key insights into human awareness and the essence of reality. Knowing about these diverse practices can help you figure out which methods fit your journey best, while also valuing the wisdom in approaches that might seem unfamiliar to you. The Theravada tradition, meaning the teaching of the elders, focuses on personal liberation by following a step-by-step approach in ethics, focus, and wisdom. It mainly centers on the historical Buddha's teachings preserved in the Pali Canon, insisting that enlightenment comes from personal effort and can't be given by outside forces. Their meditation practices usually highlight careful observation of phenomena as they arise and fade, developing insight into the 3 marks: impermanence, suffering, and not self, through first-hand experience rather than theory. This path is ideal for those who prefer straight-up days, practical guidance, and are driven by the desire for personal freedom from suffering. Typically, the Theravada path advances through clear stages of awakening, each signaling a deeper grasp and release from the mental habits that cause suffering. The first stage, known as stream entry, occurs when practitioners directly perceive the constructed nature of personal identity and the futility of seeking lasting happiness through worldly experiences. Even though stream enterers haven't eliminated all suffering from their lives, they've glimpsed the core illusions that sustain suffering, guaranteeing further progress, though it may take several lifetimes. The next two stages focus on gradually lessening the emotional patterns of craving and aversion, while the final stage represents complete freedom from all forms of emotional suffering. The Mahayana tradition, translating to the Great Vehicle, emphasizes freeing all beings, not just individual awakening, recognizing that personal and universal freedom are linked. This includes the Bodhisattva ideal, a person pledging to help all beings reach enlightenment, even if it means delaying their liberation to assist others. Mahayana philosophy developed deep theories about emptiness, understanding that all things lack inherent existence and only come about through causes, conditions, and conceptual definition. This approach appeals to individuals inclined towards service, recognizing their growth as interconnected with the well-being of others. In Mahayana, the understanding of emptiness goes beyond Theravada's analysis of not-self, applying to all phenomena, not just personal identity. Everything, not merely individual entities, exists due to a complex web of interconnected relationships. This realization breaks down artificial boundaries between self and world, sacred and ordinary, showing reality as a seamless whole rather than separate pieces. The recognition of universal emptiness forms the basis for endless compassion, as the supposed divides between your well-being and others are shown to be mere mental constructs, not ultimate truths. Within Mahayana, Pure Land Buddhism offers a path particularly suited for those who feel overwhelmed by the tough challenge of reaching enlightenment purely through personal effort. This approach highlights a deep commitment to Amitabha Buddha, a fully awakened entity who crafted a pure realm where spiritual growth is perfectly supported. By genuinely believing in and invoking Amitabha's name, followers can be reborn into this pure land, making enlightenment far more reachable than in our world filled with distractions and hurdles. This path takes the spiritual journey from a lonely struggle to a shared experience with enlightened wisdom, always there to help and guide. Zen Buddhism, born out of the fusion of Indian Mahayana philosophy and Chinese Taoist ideas, focuses on directly experiencing the mind's true nature without relying on words, theories, or gradual practices. Zen often involves intense meditation retreats, exploring paradoxical teaching tales called koans, and conversing with experienced teachers who can detect and affirm true insight, attracting people who value direct practical understanding and are open to intense practice without needing detailed explanations. Zen appeals to those who see enlightenment not as something exotic, but as realizing what's always been there. Koans in Zen deserve a closer look, as they provide a one-of-a-kind way to go beyond conceptual thinking and tap into direct insight. They're not puzzles to solve logically, but exercises to wear out the mind's usual way of processing and open doors to non-conceptual understanding. Famous koans like, "What's the sound of one hand clapping?" or "What was your original face before your parents were born?" aren't answered through logic but require a different way of knowing. Working with koans teaches practitioners to see the limits of conceptual thinking while building trust in the mind's ability for direct intuitive understanding. Tibetan Buddhism has preserved and expanded the most thorough collection of Buddhist teachings, merging aspects from all earlier traditions along with refined psychological techniques from Indian tantric traditions. This approach acknowledges that people are at various stages in their journey, so it offers a graded path system with suitable practices for newcomers, intermediate learners, and seasoned practitioners. Tibetan Buddhism is especially noted for its thorough examination of mental states and emotions, its step-by-step strategy for nurturing compassion and wisdom, and its visualization practices that use the mind's power to create and change reality through imagination. The Tibetan method of fostering compassion includes practices aimed at breaking down barriers that hinder natural empathy. A practice called Tonglen, or exchanging self and others, involves consciously taking on others' suffering while offering them relief and joy, countering the ego's instinct to dodge pain and pursue its own pleasure. This might seem self-harming or psychologically damaging, but when practiced correctly, it shows that much of what we consider suffering is actually resistance to natural human emotions like sadness, fear, and disappointment. By learning to breathe through tough feelings instead of fighting them, practitioners gain the ability to stay present with suffering without being consumed by it. The tantric side of Tibetan Buddhism provides advanced practices for those who have developed enough stability and ethical groundwork to work safely with strong psychological energies. These techniques acknowledge that the same mental energies causing suffering when expressed unconsciously can become channels for quick spiritual growth when consciously controlled. Tantric practice involves complex visualization techniques, chanting mantras, and ritual activities that engage the whole being, body, speech, and mind in the process of transformation. People who learn better through active participation rather than just observing or staying still might find this method more effective. In recent years, Western versions of Buddhist practice have mostly honed in on meditation and psychological insights, often giving less attention to aspects like rebirth, devotional rituals, or detailed philosophical systems. These adaptations have made Buddhist practices more approachable for those not drawn to traditional Asian religious styles, all while keeping the core practices that directly tackle psychological suffering intact. Techniques like mindfulness-based stress reduction and acceptance and commitment therapy show that Buddhist ideas can be lifted out of their original cultural settings without losing their transformative impact. This trend indicates that the Buddha's teachings about consciousness and suffering tap into universal truths, rather than being tied to specific cultural beliefs. The wide array of Buddhist traditions illustrates that there's not just one right way to practice the Buddha's teachings, but instead multiple effective methods suited to different individuals, cultures, and historical contexts. Across all genuine Buddhist schools, what remains unchanged is the understanding that suffering is rooted in misinterpreting reality, and this can be corrected through dedicated training in awareness, ethical conduct, and wisdom. While the techniques to develop this understanding might differ widely, the fundamental insights into impermanence, interdependence, and the constructed nature of personal identity stay the same. This adaptability allows Buddhist wisdom to keep evolving and adjusting to new situations while retaining its crucial role in relieving human suffering. Part 13. Steps to Liberation. Waking up spiritually isn't an all-at-once explosion, but more of a step-by-step journey where you peel away the illusions causing pain, each step bringing more freedom and clarity. The Buddha laid out this path with careful detail, pinpointing the insights that define different levels of understanding and explaining the mental shifts that happen as you realize your own true nature. Grasping these stages can keep you motivated, set realistic expectations for your journey, and stop you from feeling down when progress is slow or claiming success too early when understanding is still developing. Importantly, these stages show that liberation isn't about reaching some exotic place, but about learning to let go of the mind-made stories blocking the peace and freedom that were already within. The first big step on this liberation journey is called stream entry. It's when you gain a direct, unshakable grasp of some basic truths about life. Those who've reached this point haven't totally wiped out suffering from their lives, but they've seen through the core lies that keep suffering going, making further progress a sure thing, even if it takes more lifetimes to get there. This step involves 3 key realizations that change how consciousness interacts with life. These include a direct understanding of how all things are temporary, a deep realization that chasing lasting happiness through external stuff is pointless, and seeing clearly how our sense of self is just a mental construct. For someone who has reached stream entry, understanding impermanence isn't just a mental acknowledgement. It becomes a felt sense that everything in life, perceived through our senses, is continuously appearing and disappearing quickly. This insight dismantles what Buddhism calls the illusion of permanence, where we subconsciously assume that things are stable, permanent entities rather than ever-changing processes. Once this illusion crumbles through direct experience, you stop clinging desperately to experiences because it's clear there's nothing solid to hold on to. This doesn't erase natural preferences or the human enjoyment of pleasant moments, but it takes away the frantic urge to make transient experiences last. Realizing the futility of looking for lasting happiness in conditioned experiences is maybe the most practically useful insight of stream entry. Stream enterers have directly understood that every experience, no matter how delightful or meaningful, carries seeds of its own disillusionment, because no experience can provide the endless satisfaction that consciousness unknowingly craves. This realization doesn't lead to a depressing view of life or to withdrawing from it, but sparks a shift in motivation, from seeking happiness by piling up experiences to uncovering happiness that doesn't depend on specific conditions. This change wipes away the background anxiety driving much of compulsive behavior, making way for more genuine engagement with whatever life offers. Stream enterers' understanding of the made-up nature of personal identity shatters what Buddhism calls personality view, the belief in a solid, continuous self that stands apart from changing circumstances. This doesn't mean losing all personal identity, or being unable to function in social situations where you need conventional self-reference. Instead, they see personal identity as a handy tool, like longitude and latitude, helpful for navigating but not physically real. This realization removes the desperate edge from self-concern because there's less feeling of a rigid self that needs protecting or fixing. Stream enterers also gain unwavering trust in what are known as the Three Jewels, the Buddha, who discovered and shared the liberation path. The Dharma is all about understanding reality and the ways to achieve that understanding, while the Sangha, SA, is the group of people who help each other out on this journey. This kind of confidence isn't just blind faith, it's about trusting what you've seen and experienced yourself, knowing the path actually delivers as promised. Those who have reached the stage of stream entry have personally experienced a taste of liberation, so they know without a doubt that true freedom from suffering is possible, because they've had a glimpse of it themselves. This belief gives them solid motivation to keep practicing, even when things move slowly or obstacles arise. The changes in behavior that come with stream entry include a natural tendency to avoid doing things that would seriously harm oneself or others. This isn't because of some external moral code, but because of an innate understanding of how interconnected everything is. People at this stage just can't bring themselves to intentionally kill, steal, or engage in actions that cause deep suffering because they get that harming others harms the whole web of existence they're part of. They also don't go to extremes in terms of denying themselves too much or overindulging, having seen directly that neither way leads to true freedom. The next step, once returning, involves reducing those emotional patterns that cause conflict or inner turmoil. They haven't totally wiped out greed, hatred and delusion, but these traits show up less often and less intensely, thanks to ongoing practice. Anger, desire and confusion still happen, but they're less intense and pass more quickly without leading to a chain reaction of negative emotions like before. This stage is known as once returning because these practitioners are said to be just one human birth away from full liberation. The third stage, called non-returning, involves overcoming all forms of craving and aversion that tie us to the world of sensory desires. Non-returners leave behind the psychological patterns that make us cling to pleasant experiences or avoid unpleasant ones, reaching a state of deep equilibrium that stays steady no matter what's happening around them. They're free from the restless seeking that regular consciousness is caught up in, because they've found a deeper fulfillment that isn't tied to any specific conditions. At this stage they won't be reborn in human form because the desires and fears trapping us in human life are gone for good. Finally, reaching arahatship, or full liberation, means wiping out all forms of psychological suffering by fully grasping reality's true nature. Arahants have completely extinguished the flames of greed, hatred and delusion to the point where they can never spark up again. This isn't about feeling numb emotionally, but about having natural responses that come from wisdom and compassion without the distortions of self-centeredness. Arahants have realized the Buddha's promise that suffering can end entirely, showing through their own experiences that human consciousness has an endless capacity for freedom and peace. The psychological characteristics of full liberation include qualities that set Arahants apart from earlier stages. They experience a deep inner peace that can't be shaken by anything outside or any mental state. Their confidence in understanding reality isn't due to arrogance. It comes from having examined it so thoroughly that all doubts are gone. Their ethical behavior happens naturally, without needing to think about it, because their actions stem from wisdom, not conflicting desires and fears. Arahants also cultivate what are known as the divine abodes. Boundless kindness, compassion, joyful empathy, and balance extend to all living things without exception or requirement. These aren't mere emotions, but steady states of consciousness that arise once self-centered barriers are fully gone. Arhats don't love because others are lovable. Their compassion isn't lessened when help is resisted. They feel joy for others without jealousy, and their balance remains, whether faced with praise or criticism, wins or losses, joy or pain. This expression represents the peak of human emotional capabilities when free from unconscious reaction patterns. The Buddha spoke of psychic care, abilities like mind reading, past life memories and seeing karma's effects, developing alongside deep meditation. Yet he stressed these are side effects, not goals, and warned against getting too attached, as it can block real progress toward liberation. True achievement isn't about extraordinary skills, but about freeing consciousness from compulsive suffering. A fully awakened person might show remarkable abilities or seem perfectly ordinary, but they will always radiate perfect peace, wisdom and compassion. Today some practitioners wonder if these traditional awakening stages still apply, or if they were specific to another era. Modern scholars and teachers generally agree these patterns still occur, though they might show up differently based on culture and personal circumstances. The key insights in each stage seem to be universal aspects of consciousness growth, beyond just Indian tradition. Understanding these stages offers valuable insights for modern practice, while acknowledging that awakening now might also involve dimensions not emphasized in the past. Part 14. Beyond the fear of the end, death is the ultimate challenge to our spiritual understanding. The final line where philosophical ideas face the raw uncertainty of existence. The Buddha's perspective on death and what might come after reflects both his practical mindset and deep understanding of consciousness. Instead of comforting tales or terrifying threats about the afterlife, he dissected how fear of death heightens suffering and offered practical ways to find calm in the face of life's unavoidable transition. His insights on death shed light not only on life's conclusion, but also on living with the awareness of mortality. The Buddha's exploration of death started by realizing that much of our mental anguish doesn't stem directly from death, but from our fear of it that shadows everyday life. This fear operates on multiple levels, from clear worries about pain and the unknown, to a sneaky dread about losing one's identity that pushes us to seek endless meaning and security. It appears as the fear of failing, fading into obscurity, being forgotten, or not having enough time to do everything. It spurs a desperate grip on youth, frantic quests for achievements and possessions, and endless attempts to control the uncontrollable. The Buddha showed that facing the truth of death head-on, instead of dodging or denying it, lessens suffering and boosts appreciation for life. This doesn't mean obsessing over dying, but rather acknowledging that death is natural, universal, and unpredictable. Meditations on death often include thoughts on the certainty of death, uncertainty of its timing, realization that at death only spiritual growth matters, and understanding that time for growth is dwindling. These reflections aren't meant to depress, but to spark urgency and gratitude for the gift of conscious life. Observing the process of death, through witnessing others or meditating on bodily dissolution, reveals it as natural rather than an epic loss. Classic Buddhist writings detail how consciousness retreats from the body at death, starting from basic physical functions to more subtle mental activities until only the core awareness remains. These guides help not only in understanding death, but also in using meditation to connect with these subtle levels while alive. This preparation can make dying less terrifying, allowing for greater peace and awareness during the transition. The Buddha's teachings on the afterlife were marked by precision and a refusal to speculate on what couldn't be directly examined. He said that consciousness persists after physical death, carrying the karmic patterns shaped by actions throughout lives, but this doesn't mean the existence of an unchanging soul. Death is more like one conscious moment evolving into the next, rather than a person's journey from one place to another. What continues isn't the you of today, but a stream of conditioned consciousness that forms your current personal identity. In Buddhist psychology, rebirth is about consciousness taking form in new circumstances that align with past karmic habits. This isn't cosmic justice handed down by an external judge, but a natural outcome shaped by countless moments of intention and action. People who've nurtured generosity, wisdom, and compassion often find themselves reborn into situations that encourage these traits to develop further. On the flip side, those swayed by greed, hatred, and delusion typically end up in environments that echo and reinforce these negative patterns. Rebirth isn't just about different human experiences. It can mean entirely unique forms of conscious existence, ranging from immense suffering to wild bliss and everything in between. Yet the Buddha always stressed that pondering the specifics of rebirth doesn't matter, as much as figuring out how to live wisely right now. Whether consciousness persists after death through countless lives or ends for good when the brain stops, the core truths of Buddhist psychology stay the same. Suffering comes from hidden mental habits, which can be changed with awareness, ethics, and wisdom. The steps to lower suffering and boost real happiness work no matter what you think happens after you die. This sensible approach stops Buddhist practice from turning into a daydream about future lives while staying open to realms that may stretch beyond what science currently grasps. For those who do believe in rebirth, the Buddha offered ways to ready the mind for better navigation through death and rebirth, with more understanding and choice. This includes getting comfy with subtle consciousness states via meditation, fostering positive mental tendencies that shape rebirth, and seeing reality so clearly that your mind stays sharp during the dizzying shifts that come with dying. Advanced learners might even figure out how to choose their rebirth scene, returning to a life where they can better help everyone break free. This embodies the Bodhisattva goal. Personal freedom is a launch pad for endless compassion, not just a way to escape life's pains. The Buddha also talked about how the fear of dying eases naturally as your understanding grows, not because of cozy tales about life after death, but by grasping what death can and can't really do. Death might wrap up your current body and self, but it can't mess with the core of awareness, which is constant and just holds all shifting experiences. Death can't wipe out the good vibes from kind deeds, which will still affect future experiences, no matter their form. Most crucially, seeing reality clearly brings liberation, which death can't undo, because this freedom never relied on having certain body or mind states anyway. Getting older offers lots of practice in dealing gracefully with change and letting go, acting as a slow prep for the last letting go that death brings. Each life phase requires leaving behind old roles, abilities and relationships that aren't viable anymore, giving hands-on lessons in the graceful acceptance of natural changes. Those aging wisely find that letting go frees them up and allows room for fresh appreciation and involvement that wasn't possible, while hanging on to past life stages. This same insight makes dying less daunting, because it's not losing what matters, but the final part in a lifetime of beneficial yielding to change's natural course. Buddhist funeral and mourning customs mirror this understanding by highlighting the deceased's positive impact and continuing legacy, rather than solely focusing on sorrow and loss. Even though grief is naturally felt when parted from loved ones, Buddhist psychology knows that too much mourning can disturb the departed's peaceful transition by tying their consciousness to past bonds. When someone dies, the kindest way to respond is to send them best wishes for whatever journey their consciousness might take, while using this reminder of life's fragility to cherish the moments we have with those who are still here. This viewpoint turns the experience of death from something heartbreaking into a chance to deepen our spiritual growth and compassion for others. When Buddha was nearing the end of his life, he taught that death is just a natural change and not some grand disaster. Right before he passed, he reportedly said, "All conditioned things are impermanent. Work out your salvation with diligence." These words capture both the acceptance that everything temporary eventually fades and the push to make the most of our time while we're alive. It suggests that death isn't a puzzle to solve or a foe to conquer, but rather a natural ending to face with the same calm awareness we seek throughout our lives.